around here on Smartmen's Business. Now, we talk the Ebola outbreak. Yesterday, the Ministry of Health did confirm that Uganda has a patient of Ebola. And this is according to sources here, news sources. The lack of certainty about the index patient in the renewed Ebola outbreak in the country has plugged health officials into overdrive as they seek answers on how to contain the highly contagious disease that reports suggest could have been around for weeks and is only coming to light now. Now, when you look at some of the signs and symptoms of Ebola, include fever, the sore throat, pains, weakness, and fatigue. Then there's also loss of appetite. And when you look at that, there's also unexplained bleeding or bruising that normally happens. So those are some of the signs and symptoms. Now, when you look at the incubation of Ebola, it takes around 21 days. That is between 2 days to 3 weeks to manifest after infection for it to finally come out. Now, there's over 6 deaths under investigation to clearly see what led to their death. Is it Ebola or that? Now, the first case of Ebola was reported in Mubende district, but the bigger question would still be, are we prepared for Ebola? Because government says they are prepared. And then why is it that one case of Ebola leads to an outbreak? But also, speaking just of the Ebola outbreak now, a quick background of Ebola. Uganda has had 4 Ebola virus disease outbreaks from 2000, then 2014, 2017, and 2018. Now, this is the 5th. The biggest and most deadly was in 2000, and it registered 425 cases and 224 deaths were counted that year. Uganda was finally declared Ebola-free on 27th February 2001, 40 days after the last case was reported. Then the government's role in coordination of both local and international support was by then vital. Now, the NTF and the corresponding district committees harmonized implementation of a mutually agreed program to ensure that at least the spread does not go further. Community mobilization using community-based resource persons and political organs such as members of parliament was effective in getting information to the public at the time. This was critical in controlling the epidemic. But however, when you look at the issue to do with Ebola's outbreak, just recently here, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, did reveal that the COVID-19 pandemic was officially done in the United States, and clearly pushing us back to a situation where you get to realize 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic here in Uganda. Now comes Ebola. Now, once Ebola comes into space, the business community is likely to at least get it in one way or the other. But the government says they will not restrict any travel. So the restrictions will not be as tight as that of COVID-19. But citizens need to be very cautious to prevent Ebola from affecting them. But on the other hand, now we go in touch with some of the legislators, and these particular legislators were giving us their view on the Ebola outbreak. Here in this particular outlet, we've got Honorable Dickson Kateshumbwa and giving us more of the insightful discussion on whether this comes in. Let's first have a look at this, as well as Honorable Ayume Charles giving us their view on the Ebola outbreak.
Question you're raising, that did the Ministry of Health rush to, we only have one case as per this morning, one confirmed case by Uganda Virus Institute. The question that was raised, which I found the Honorable Member of Parliament, I think, misguided Parliament, that did government rush to pronounce an outbreak or an epidemic with only one case? Now, I must assure our viewers and fellow Ugandans that we have a spectrum of diseases that cause outbreaks or epidemics. Different ones have what we call thresholds. Like, I want to also educate you that malaria, we also get malaria outbreaks. But those ones have to be in tens of thousands or 100,000 in a particular geographical area. But with diseases like Ebola, Marburg, what we call hemorrhagic fevers, we cannot wait to get 10 or 50 or 100 because they spread like a wildfire and they are very fatal. The Ebola we got in 2001 had a case fatality of over 90%, meaning if 10 people got that strain of Ebola, 9 would die. That was the one we got in 2001. It was highly virulent. So with such a disease, you cannot wait for numbers for us to declare. One is an outbreak. Marburg, Ebola, measles. You cannot say, let us wait for 10 children in the homestead to... There's a threshold. I think for measles it's 2 or 3. Polio. Because if children get polio, they become lame. So we cannot say, let us wait. You have to blow the whistle. Immediately you get one case. So the Honorable Member of Parliament did not guide well. And hopefully, if I'm given a chance tomorrow on the floor of Parliament, I'll have to guide the House as to why the Minister of Health, the Minister of State for Health, read a press statement from the Ministry of Health that declares an outbreak of Ebola.
Very disturbed by today's pronouncement by the ministry to declare that there is Ebola simply because of one case that they have seen, and then it is all over the world, and already there are questions about the tourists, whether it is safe or not. So our ministries, especially the Ministry of Health, they need to be connected to the economy before they make certain pronouncements. As a country, you first understand, is this something that is so big that you must pronounce, then you affect the other sectors of the economy? Or you should first take time and understand to make sure that you don't cause alarm for tourists coming into Uganda.
One case is a small case.
It's a small case because we have not even known the magnitude of it. For you to declare news all of a sudden, I think for me is being insensitive to the economy that is struggling to do what? It's just like any other thing, any other demonstration. There are countries where we know things happen, but they take time to manage, to first of all understand before it is a big disaster. You don't come out, to declare bad news when you know that it is actually too early. For me, it is premature to declare certain things in a hurry before you have studied them properly.
And there you have it. From the analysis the two have given, you get to realize that it is upon us to be cautious, but then also the business community may be affected in the long journey just because almost all sectors are recovering from the shocks of COVID-19. Now here comes the Ebola outbreak. But for the Ugandans, please do remember to be cautious in regards to Ebola and report any cases that you've seen around there to the nearest health officials in your communities as well, so that we can as well kick this out again. Okay, besides that, now we head to more of the SMB app that's looking at Uganda's tourism sector. Now, the tourism sector is one that contributes greatly to Uganda's economy, and it's now increasingly becoming a contributor to also the employment sector. When you look at the 1.5 million international arrivals that were, according to statistics in 2018, combined with a growing number of domestic tourists, there was a generation of 7.75% of GDP and 6.7% of total national employment that was of 2018. And the vast majority of international arrivals, of 80%, come from Africa, surprisingly. Now, also, on the other hand, today in the Coffee Code discussions, we got to realize that the tourism sector, leisure and tourism sector, is one of the sectors that employs more females than the male, just like agriculture. Because when you look at agriculture, it's looked at as a sector that employs both, but also employing a lot of females in there. But also from the tourism sector, there are those females or women who are either in the informal sector or in the formal sector of Uganda's tourism. Now here, we want to understand how is tourism recovering, more so from the angle of domestic tourism. Let's have a look.
Interestingly, it has been interesting and very encouraging. Of course, we had challenges when we got COVID, the numbers. Because of the lockdowns, there was hardly travel, which also worked in our favor because now the Ugandans were confined to our boundaries, and they wouldn't move outside the country. But of course, that gave them a chance to explore, and we've seen that they've appreciated the beauty of this country. If you look at the figures currently out of recovery, unprecedented, because it has never happened before, that now Ugandans are traveling almost at the same, or visiting most of our protected areas. I want to use the protected areas as an example. The numbers entering those parks are the same for foreigners and for Ugandans. You find in a month around 7,000, I was just talking about July. If you go, for instance, to Queen Elizabeth, of the 14,000 people that visited the park, you'll find that 7,000 are foreign non-residents. But 7,000 as well are East Africans, but majorly Ugandans. If you go to the month of June, still out of the 8,000 that visited the park, you'll find that 4,200 were foreign non-residents. 4,000 still maybe 100 are the Ugandans. So it is interesting, and Ugandans are now traveling, not only to parks, most of the islands that we have, the Kalangala, the Bunyonyi, the most of our marine tourism now. If you look at the source of the Nile, if you look at tubing on Jinja, almost all these activities, the bungee jumping, so they are moving around. But of course, as they move around, they support owners of accommodation. These people employ local communities within these areas, but also buy local food, also give service. So it's a long chain, and I want to appreciate the Ugandans for participating, because what we've said is the only way we can create a more resilient tourism sector after COVID, what we learned, so that we protect ourselves from the challenges that don't really emanate from us, but from the outside non-controllable factors that we cannot control as a country, is by having the Ugandans to travel. And we are seeing it happen. And I want to encourage them more. Traveling is cheap for us in Uganda. If you look at how much money you pay to enter the park, is around 20,000. A foreigner pays around $40. So it is not much money. Please travel. The infrastructure is good. Travel and love this country and share. Whenever you travel, please tweet about it.
First of all, it is in a recovery mode, because we were affected by COVID pandemic, and most of the hotels which were being developed had loans, and the loans have matured, but the business has not reached the peak where it is supposed to have reached. Secondly, some of the existing facilities needed a facelift. They deteriorated during COVID period because of shutdown. So the tourism industry still needs a lot of support to recover, especially upcountry lodges. But there are signs that now that the pandemic is almost declared over, we are going to see more and more tourists coming. However,
All right. Now, apparently, when you look at the tourism sector in Uganda, it is now being shaped around youth domestic tourism, because at least during the situation of COVID-19, we got to realize that with the travel restrictions, a few foreign tourists could come to Uganda. Then that means domestic companies had to step up their game and ensure that Ugandans get involved in the sector. And this is actually reaping up big numbers. Big companies are being set up. Ugandans are traveling to these places. Places are now affordable for most of the Ugandans, because they've got to realize you cannot hit an outside market before your neighbors or before the in-house is yet to appreciate that. So that is the tourism sector, and just like the Minister of State for Tourism has said, we need to make sure that we understand more and take part in touring our country and exploring the beauty that comes with the Pearl of Africa. Okay. Now, lastly, from the SMB outlets this morning, we head to the East African Legislative Assembly. Yesterday was nomination day at Parliament. Now, Article 49 of the East African Community Treaty establishes that the East African Legislative Assembly, as the legislative organ of the community, like most legislatures, the EALA, that is the East African Legislative Assembly, has its core functions of legislating, oversight, and representation. Now, Article 49 further states that EALA, that is the East African Legislative Assembly, shall shall liaise with the national assemblies of partner states on matters relating to the community. Then shall debate and approve the budget of the community, that is the financial year budget. Then they shall as well consider annual reports on the activities of the community, which also include annual audit reports of the Audit Commission, and then any other reports referred to it by the Council. Then they will as well discuss all matters pertaining to the community and make recommendations to the Council as it may deem necessary for the implementation of the treaty. Now, the legislators who apparently went through nomination are in this update giving us more of what the East African community will expect if at all they go out there to represent them. But do they know the burden ahead for them to represent, to ably represent this country at the Assembly? Let's have more of this update.
For me, you remember, I went in East African community as by 26 July 2021. But of course, I found my colleagues when they have done some work where I need to add on more. The treaty has 4 objectives. 1, the East African Customs Union. The East African Customs Union needs some legal framework that's still missing, especially on non-tariff barriers, which is a big challenge, and we need to deal with it within the legal framework. Then the common market. The common market, we need to protect our industries locally within the partner states against the production of goods which are coming out from the partner states, and which I think now we have to introduce a new ban of a common market external tariff so that the partner states can enjoy and protect their own production within the states as an intra-trade. Because when you produce some goods which are competing with external, with the imported goods within outside the partner states, the competition becomes a bit difficult.
We have done our best as a legislature to pass laws for purpose of facilitating the integration of East Africa in terms of trade and the movement of people as well as investment. There has been generally challenges in terms of implementation of those laws. Now the task which we have is that if we are given this opportunity to serve a second term, we are going to look at those laws that are impeding integration and propose amendments to ensure that we facilitate trade and the deepening of integration.
I'm very much interested to ensure we fight the interests of workers, unionized workers, and also those who are not unionized workers across board. And that includes the professionals like how with Dr. Elonia Chimusa, that is belonging to the University Professional Academic Staff Union and the COF2, because we realize that the rights and the freedom of workers in the East African region, they need a special desk of the members of parliament elected among the 9, who will ensure that they do run after these issues so closely, and that links us to the East African economic integration. And I believe the honorable members of parliament, I come into this race to assure you that we need to pay keen attention to have a representation that matches with the East African Community Treaty Act 51 and 2. And also, we are aware in the East African region and currently across board, there have been labor externalization which is not regularized. And having a member of parliament that is keen on the plight of our citizens, the youth population, which matches to a tune of 79% that are not employed. And that is why I come very much interested to fight for the East African economic integration, free movement of goods, and also to take care, keen care, that East Africa, it's high time we see the operationalization of the East African community.
All right, and Dr. Joseph Tindewa, also a fellow with us here, part of the election process in there. He was nominated yesterday on the card of FDC. and he will be as well aspiring to be an MP on the East African Legislative Assembly in there. He's a host for The Point here on Smart 24 TV and Polycon as well. And tonight he will be live on air, and you'll definitely get him here on Polycon, driving you into on The Point, driving you into more of the business ideas and matters to do with Uganda's economic space. And that is it for the updates this morning. After the break, we return with Barija Andrew on ground. Stick around.